It takes a brave and independent mindset to go tiny. If you are trying to figure out your tiny pivot, this podcast is here to inspire and connect you with the other unconventional, gritty, inspirational people within this community. I am Laura Lynch, your tiny house friend and host. On this show, we are always going to come back to money because as a financial planner, this is the question I hear the most. How do I make this work for me financially? Well, that's my jam, so jump in, let's go. New episodes drop every Thursday. Well, Holly Davis, welcome to Less House, More Moola podcast. Listeners, this is one of my favorite colleagues. We sit together on an unconventional living study group. We talk about financial planning for unconventional lifestyles, and Holly has a very particular angle and niche that she's focused on. So we're going to have a very nerdy conversation today. So Holly, thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been really excited and looking forward to this conversation.
It really sounds like that from what I've heard from you, that your van life trip was really life-changing and perspective shifting. So we'll definitely get into all of that. And I'm sure listeners will love to hear from your experience. So just to kick us off, would you introduce yourself and kind of your interest in tiny living, minimalism, kind of how you came to this mindset?
Yeah, I would say that for me, it started when I met my husband 22 years ago. I met him and, we were in our 20s, not making a whole lot of money. And he's always been pretty, I would say, fiscally conservative. There was a bigger gap between the two of us when we first met, and now we over the years met in the middle. But when we first met, he definitely, did not spend much money. And neither of us were making that, a whole lot. So we've kind of carried throughout our relationship of 22 years, kind of this mentality of less is more. And that's always been my favorite quote, and that I put on web pages at employers and so forth, where you put a little tidbit about yourself. My quote is less is more, which really carries through all aspects of my life. So as far as tiny living, we after we got married, my husband had a townhouse. I live in Seattle, and he had a townhouse, and we knew that we didn't want to stay there. We were planning to have a child, eventually. And we knew that we wanted to stay in Seattle, but didn't want to be in the neighborhood where we were. So after we got married, the opportunity came up to buy our close friend's house, which is a 1 square foot house. They were planning on having 3 children, and we were only planning to have 1. So it just was an easy move to move into this small house. It was affordable on what salaries we were making. We definitely could have afforded more, but just as far as what our comfort levels, in particular my husband's, we were like, no, I think it was maybe around 15%, of our incomes. That's what kind of we wanted. And the other aspect was it was in a neighborhood that had really good public schools, so K through 12 public schools. So we thought, well, this is, great. We'll be able to send our child to public schools, not have to pay for private schools. And so that was kind of how it started. But then, beyond just our house lifestyle of, having the less is more mentality, we have never been big on material items. When we met, we were both bike racers, and so any money that we had, if it wasn't being saved, was going towards bikes or bike paraphernalia, skis, and so forth, not towards clothes or fancy cars. We used to joke how when we would go to bike races that the bikes on the roof of the car were worth more than the car itself. So we definitely had, our values have always been aligned with, our activities in the outdoors and so forth. And so in addition to that, we were, up until 3 years ago, we were a 1-car family. We just feel like having too many possessions causes us stress. And so when you live in a small house, you can only accumulate so much. And yeah, up until 3 years ago, we were a 1-car family. And then until my dad gifted me his car because he was too old to drive any longer. And then other than that, like when when we would travel, our favorite way to traveling was bike touring, self-supported bike touring. On our honeymoon, we did a 3 month long self-supported bike tour through Europe, Western and Eastern Europe. And that's just been one of our favorite ways of traveling and meeting local people, seeing people. It's less expensive. So in addition to just like wanting to reduce stress, the other aspect is just financially, tiny living enables you to spend money on things that you value. And for us, spending money on, travel and experiences, and then being able to save more money towards retirement has really, which I didn't realize, 20 years ago, that our way of living would have enabled us to get where we are today, which is with, a lot of flexibility. We're still in the same house, we make more money now, but we, have the same mortgage. And so we're in a very good spot of having a lot of flexibility if we want to retire early. We're now having to put our child through private school because we found out that he has dyslexia and ADHD. So we have the flexibility to be able to afford private tuition. And so I feel like tiny living is like one of those things that you don't necessarily talk about with many people, because it seems like in society there's this mentality of more is more, and I need the bigger and the fancier house, and I need the fancy car or multiple fancy cars. So it's not something that we necessarily talk about, with friends, but you find that you connect with the people who live similarly. But it's definitely, I wouldn't change anything just because of where we're at today, and having that flexibility. So I think that's kind of, I don't know, that's how my interest in tiny living and how we've continued to live that lifestyle.
It sounds like that your self-supported bike trips were like it seems like a natural segue into a van trip, right? Because it's maybe a lower cost of travel in terms of not, renting homes or Airbnbs, and you have flexibility to meet people and go where you want and that sort of thing. So now it all makes sense to me why you were immediately attracted to the van life trip. But you did mention to me before that you had a specific intention around that trip. So share with us, what was your intention for your recent trip with your family in a van?
Yeah, so our intention, so every summer we take a 2-week vacation. And sometimes it's challenging to find a vacation that all three of us, so we're a family of three, me and my husband and our 13-year-old son, and now a 1-year-old dog who is a very high energy dog. So it's at times challenging to find a vacation that everyone is really excited about. And so the van trip, so my son has always loved camping. We've all always loved camping, but I am to a point in my life now where I can only take so many nights of sleeping on the ground in a tent. So the van was a good happy medium of a way of traveling that could be simple, but also having enough comforts. So that was the primary thing. Is the trip had to check a couple of boxes. One, it had to be something that our entire active family would be excited about. And then the other aspect is that we had to be able to take our dog. So she's a year old, and for various reasons, it's hard to find a dog sitter for her at this point. So she had to come along. And so that was something else. And I think my husband and I knew that this would be, going back to our self-supported bike tours, one thing that we loved about those trips is just being able to go at a slow pace and just enjoying the simple everyday rituals of life, of getting up in the morning, having coffee, and, having a slow morning, chatting with your neighbors in the campground who you'll probably never see again, but meeting people from other countries, and then going off, being active during the day, riding bikes and so forth, coming back in the evenings, going to the grocery store, deciding what you're going to have for dinner, having dinner and then, turning in for the night. So we knew that this was something that we would like. The other aspect, another reason that my husband and I wanted to do this trip was as kind of like a prototype for retirement. So eventually our plan is, once our son is he's off to college or whatever, once he's independent, our plan is to get a van and, live van life for part of the year. So it was partly to kind of test that out and see if that's what we wanted to do. And so this trip, we did it in the summer. It was this past summer. And we went up to British Columbia for 2 weeks and took our mountain bikes. And so we had to be active. We had to be able to spend lots of time in the outdoors, and it had to be something that the whole family would like. And that definitely checked all the boxes. So that was our intention.
That's beautiful. Going back to the dog, and for all those dog listeners out there, traveling with your animals brings a lot of challenge to the picture, for sure, especially 1-year-old dogs. They're like babies. And so
yes, they are.
Yeah. And it's definitely brings a whole nother element. And yet you feel like you don't want to leave your dog behind. If you're going to go have an adventure, you want them to have an adventure too. And so what a great way to do that is to do the van option. Why did you choose a van rather than an RV?
So, I think you were the one that referred me to Eric. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, Rzuski. He has that website, familytrucksters.co.
A former podcast guest.
Okay, that's right. So I chatted with him, and I think we had already decided on a van before I talked with him. I think the reason we picked a van was more like just the simplicity of it, more mobile, like just to pick up and like drive to, a quick drive to the store. RVs, I think there's a lot more involved. Like you go and you have to set up, and I think you have to get it all, just right, perfectly balanced and that sort of thing. I think we just didn't want to mess with that. We wanted to be able to show up at a campground and just open up the van door, throw everything out, and be able to set up fairly quickly. So just the whole less is more mentality of it. And our goal for this trip was not to spend time inside, so we didn't need a really big spacious RV. It was the summer, it was warm. We didn't want to be sitting inside because that just encourages my son to play on his Game Boy or whatever, his Nintendo Switch. So the goal was to be outside, not in the van, and then also for the simplicity. So that's how we chose a van over an RV.
And so you rented a van, and some listeners may not even be aware that you can rent a van life van for a vacation in the same way that you can rent an RV. How did you figure out, or sort of navigate the logistics of where you can rent a van and what kind of van to get and what would be a good fit for 3 humans and 1 canine and all of that?
Right. So again, my conversation with Eric, he gave me several websites, and ultimately, and he also recommended, based on our situation, he recommended a specific van to get. So he recommended a Winnebago Solus, which has a pop top. So there was room for sleeping quarters downstairs as well as upstairs. And ultimately, we ended up finding the perfect van on, it's called outdoorsy.com, which is it's like a VRBO, but for renting vans and RVs. So we were able to find a pretty new one, within a half an hour of our house. So Winnebago Solus, and it had everything that we needed. Trying to think if there was anything specific, but yeah, it was really getting Eric's help with deciding exactly which van to get, and then found it on Outdoorsy, and it was pretty easy.
On Less Has More Moola, we hear so many stories of people living unconventional lives. Each of them is literally building their all-American dream. Are you tired of putting your dreams on hold because of money? Well, let's fix it. I have a 2-part offering that is here to help you. First, I'm going to give you access to my financial freedom calculator so that you'll understand your numbers and have a tangible starting point. This is free. And then second, we'll book a session to figure out your finances so that you can live your alt American dream as soon as possible. This is paid. Why am I giving you something for free? Because I'm passionate about empowering people to choose an unconventional path. So let's work together to figure out money so that you will know that you've officially taken action on your plans. This offering is for you if you're unsure of your cost of living or how much savings you might need. You don't know what money move to make next. You dream of an unconventional life built on your terms. You're seeking a permanent solution and not a one-time motivational boost. You want to learn about money from someone who shares your interest in breaking away from the norm. So what do you think? Are you tired of starting sentences with someday when I? Then go to altamericandream.com and get the financial freedom calculator.
That's amazing. Do you know, like, could you remember, like, roughly how many vans there were, like, in a relatively close radius? I have no idea. I've never looked on this site about how many vans are out there for rent.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I mean, in such a wide variety. Like some people like will rent out just like their 4x4, truck that's got a tent on the top. And I'm in Seattle, so there's probably more. There's a fair number of options, and I noticed that there was a lot like in close range to the airport. So there was quite a few, and I think ours, I think was available because there was a non-refundable policy. So most people want to be able to refund, but we knew exactly what we wanted and when we wanted to go. So we were able to find a really good one. But there is lots of options. I think in particular, if you're not leaving it to the last minute, especially in the summer, if you're planning, several months in advance, I think the earlier you book it, the sooner. And it probably depends on like where you're located, but Seattle has had quite a number of options.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm excited that those sites exist and that people get a chance to try that out, because certainly it's an expensive thing to get into van life, and if it's not going to be a good fit for you for whatever reason, it's another, just another opportunity that you need to try before you buy.
Absolutely. And it's a great opportunity, for people who do decide to buy a van, to kind of offset the cost, by renting it out. And I guess there's different, mentalities like, you have to deal with, renting it out and, some of the hassles. But if you, want to make some income off of it, you can do that to help offset the cost. But yeah, absolutely, a much better way of going to rent it first, just to kind of like, test it out, which is like what I tell a lot of my financial, I'm a financial planner. And so when I'm working with clients and they're getting ready for retirement, I'm like, what are you going to do when every day is a Saturday? You need to test this thing out. And, I have a lot of clients who are, similarly quite outdoorsy and do van trips. And so it's good, a good way, and a good way to save money, because maybe you figure out that, you don't really like van life, and that would be pretty expensive, if you go and buy a van and you don't know yet whether you like it. So.
Awesome. While we're on that point, I was just checking, one of the links that we're going to put in the show notes for you is a link to Strava. Is it Strava? Is that what it's called? Strava? Yeah, Strava, which is your biking profile on that biking runner app. And so it sounds like that in your practice, you're really focused on serving people who want to be outdoors a lot, and their values are aligned with yours in terms of spending their time and their energy and and deriving their passion from their outdoor adventures.
That's right. Yeah. So I like to tell people I really dislike social media overall, except for Strava, because that's where my people are. So it's essentially an app where you track all of your activities. I mean, even when I go out and walk my dog, and you can take pictures. So whatever you're doing, biking, running, skiing, hiking, and it's a way to like see like what your friends are doing, and you can take pictures and you can get an idea of like, oh, that looks like a really cool spot. So we tracked all of our biking when we were up in British Columbia on our trip, and like posted pictures of the van. And so yeah, that's the only social media that I actually really like. And yeah, you're right. So in my financial planning practice, my targeted niche, I won't say all of my clients, but my targeted niche is mid-career professionals who not just enjoy like being active in the outdoors, but in adventures in the outdoors, or just in general value life experiences and maximizing memories over accumulating things, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Awesome. So back to your van trip, what was the best part of your adventure?
The best part was that we all had a great time. The whole family had a great time, and no one was itching to get back home. But we got to see, because we were able to drive and be so mobile, in 2 weeks, we visited 3 different locations. We first went to Squamish, which is just south of Whistler. There's a lot of rock climbing and cycling and running. And then we went north and a bit east to Sun Peaks Resort, which is like a little mini Whistler. It's a ski resort in the winter and a mountain bike park in the summer. And then, so we did like 3 or 4 days in each place. And then after Sun Peaks, we went south to what's called Silver Star Resort, which is the same thing, ski resort in the winter, bike park in the summer. So it was fun to be able to visit 3 different places, and just, easily be able to pack up the van, at the end of one spot and like, drive a few hours to the next place. So I just really love the flexibility and getting to see, new places. So it's hard to say what the best part was, but overall, the fact that it was a memorable experience and we all equally loved it, including the dog, because she didn't have to stay home.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And what was challenging about it, if anything, living all of you in such a small space, or?
Yeah. The hardest part was that, and this is also like what we would do different next time, is we took too much stuff. And it's really easy because I would say to my husband, I was like, can we bring this? And he was like, well, it'll fit. But what we didn't know is that if you put too much stuff in the van, there's a lot of then constant rearranging. So, all of it fit. But then when it came time for evening and everyone to go to bed, we had to put down our Murphy bed, which meant we had to move the stuff that was underneath where the Murphy bed was and move it into the front of the van. And we couldn't all be in the van at the same time until it was like exactly time to go to bed. So it was like everyone out. So we took too much stuff, but that wasn't a big deal. The only other challenging part that wasn't that big of a deal either was during times when it got really hot, our dog had to stay in the van while we were out mountain biking. So we had to run the generator in the morning for a little bit to run the air conditioning so that she wouldn't cook in the van. So it was all fine. She was never close to, being at risk or danger or anything. But that was another aspect of bringing along a canine. And when it's hot, is just making sure they stay cool. So other than that, there was no challenges. I hit my head a lot on the inside of the van, but also, minor, getting used to small spaces. So.
Yeah, awesome. So did you have any like deep learnings or shallow learnings? Anything that you all learned about that?
Coming back, after living in the van for 2 weeks or living in and out of the van, our 1,000 square foot house felt very spacious, which, at times over the years I've been like, oh, you should get a bigger house, until you live in a van for 2 weeks and you're like, no, this is plenty big. We don't need anything more. In fact, we have too much stuff in our small house. So I feel like, how much we enjoyed that just kind of reaffirmed our tiny living, less is more, minimalism way of life. And, I we definitely won't change things. Sometimes I think I'd like to have like a newer house, but never a bigger house. And I think, yeah, we definitely learned that we still would like to live van life. At least my husband and I would like to live van life more often during the year once my son is, out of the house. We can't really do it right now while he's in school. We can do trips, but once we're like, semi-retired / retired, we definitely would like to buy a van at some point. It's definitely on the list, but we've decided that maybe not quite yet. We're not quite ready to make that investment. And then as far as that's more on the personal side. On the professional side, I think I kind of, and this whole journey of me, I launched my own financial planning firm in the last year. And my journey, my intention with my financial planning practice has been to blend my work with my personal life. I felt like when I got into financial planning, I felt like I had to put on this front. There was like the work Holly, and then there was the personal Holly. And I would go to work, put on my fancy pants and my belt and my button-down shirt, and I had to be one person. Then at the end of the day, I'd put on my bike jersey and my shorts and hop on my bike and ride home. And it always felt like I had to be these two different people. And so part of my journey that I'm still learning to embrace and grasp as far as my niche has really been to blend those two things. And this trip, and then and along with my journey with my practice, I've kind of learned that there are people out there who are drawn to my niche of wanting to work with, being out there, about being really outdoorsy and valuing experiences over things. So it's felt very validating. So from a professional standpoint, I feel like I can continue to do that. And, it's made me feel closer to like clients who I share some of these, values with. And it's by doing so, I've been able to have more and deep conversations with clients because they share with me, what, adventures they've been off doing, whereas I didn't do that before. It was always like business. Okay, what's going on with your money? And we didn't talk about like the personal side of things. So it's been quite a journey, but it's been amazing just to be able to have deeper relationships with clients, and to be able to talk about these things, to say, hey, we're going on a 2-week trip and we're going to rent a van and go mountain biking, and it's nice to be able to feel okay about sharing that with clients, because I know that they'll be excited for me and so forth. So
yeah, so it seems like that as entrepreneurs we have that flexibility to move progressively towards being more of our authentic self. And certainly there are challenges with wearing so many hats, but it's great to be in a place in your profession at this point where you have lived a lower cost living. And so you can build up a practice that is surrounded around you and your values.
absolutely. Yeah. And living, I could not so I launched my practice a little over a year ago, and we've been able to live on my husband's salary, and just, I could not, as I said, I become more fiscally conservative, I think, since I became a financial planner, and I would not have felt comfortable like launching if, we couldn't have lived on my husband's salary. And that's just, it's come from having a lower mortgage and just living with less. So I just I feel so fortunate. Obviously, many, positive things have, been part of my life to enable this to happen. But a big part of that was having, a really low mortgage and just maybe not spending as much as, others or whatever. But Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you definitely accomplished your intention for your trip. If you were to do it again, is there anything you would change?
Gosh, I mean, really not. We'd go for more than 2 weeks. We would bring less stuff, and we would just go somewhere different than where we went the last time, but really not. There was really very little that we would change. So we feel like, yeah, it was super successful.
So, you talked a little bit about how you think about your business moving forward and, how you think about maybe early retirement. Certainly some, time out there in the forest and away from maybe business kind of helps you re-energize or reframe things. Is there anything that, really made you think differently about your future, your personal and professional future after taking that time away?
I mean, I think I might have said this before, but I love, what I'm doing professionally. The reason I decided to launch my own firm was to make it something that would be sustainable for a long period of time. And even if I achieve financial independence in the next 10 years or whatever, I plan to keep doing what I'm doing because I love it. So, maybe part of the year could be while, doing it on the road. I'm, working virtually as I am now. So I definitely plan to keep working. Personally, I don't think anything has changed. I feel like our trip really reaffirmed our lifestyle, and living simply, and realizing that often we think we need something more to make us happy, but really not. It's, for me, happiness comes from, having joy and harmony in my tight little family, and we have that, and that's really all I need. To live a happy life. And so, that was being able to live out of a van for 2 weeks with harmony. That was, I think, pretty amazing. And so I feel so fortunate that we have the relationship that we do, but, between me and my husband and our son, I just feel, so fortunate to have that tight knit family. So no, I wouldn't change anything because things are too good on that end.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience with us, Holly. I'm sure that those, good ideas will help inspire other people to consider taking some time off and doing a van life trip and using that as a frame up for what they want in the future. If listeners want to track you down or follow you or get in touch, how would they do that?
Let's see. Well, you can email me if you want. My email address is holly@AltaViaFP. So my firm name is AltaVia Financial Planning. My website is altaviafp.com. I'm on Instagram under AltaViaFP. Strava, look up Holly Davis in Seattle, Washington. I'm also on LinkedIn under Holly Davis. So yeah, and I don't post much on social media outside of Strava, but I do have a presence, just not a regular presence on social media. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I really enjoyed it.
Hey, thank you for taking the time to listen to Less House, More Moola. I have another free resource on my website for you, the Unconventional Values Quiz. In just 2 minutes, you can pinpoint your style of freedom seeker, security guardian, adventure enthusiast, or community builder. Check it out at thetinyhouseadvisor.com. And one more thing. Podcasts don't have algorithms like social media does. They only grow by word of mouth and reviews. If this podcast is helpful to you, would you please post a review on your podcast app and tell a friend who is trying to live a values-based life? It would totally make my day.
Please see the show notes for important disclosure regarding the Tiny House Advisor LLC and this episode.